The year was 2471. Humanity had reached beyond the cradle of Earth, establishing outposts across the stars. At the edge of the Orion Delta galaxy, the Earth Union's terraforming stations stood as beacons of progress and ambition. They were monuments to human ingenuity, transforming inhospitable worlds into potential homes for a species that had outgrown its birthplace. Terraforming Station. Theta 9 gleamed against the backdrop of space, its massive habitat rings rotating in perfect synchronization. The station housed over 200,000 souls, scientists, engineers, workers, and their families, all united in the grand project of reshaping a distant moon to bear Earth's likeness. Captain Nira Solis stood at the observation deck, her dark eyes fixed on the curved horizon of the moon below. Her weathered face reflected both pride and concern. As the head of security for Theta 9, she carried the weight of all those lives on her shoulders. The station's expansion had been too rapid for her comfort, pushing too far into territories that ancient star charts marked with warnings. "Another beautiful day in paradise," said a voice behind her. Nira turned to see Lian, her adopted daughter, approaching with a tablet in hand. Lian's dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, her lab coat bearing the insignia of the Terraforming Sciences Division, if you can call it that. Nira replied, gesturing toward the barren landscape below. "How's the atmospheric seeding coming along?" "Ahead of schedule." Lian's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "The microbial colonies are taking hold faster than projected. Within a decade, we might have breathable air down there." Nira nodded, but couldn't share the excitement. 20 years as a military strategist had taught her to see threats where others saw opportunity. The Union's rapid expansion into this sector had alarmed her from the beginning. "You're doing that thing again," Lian said, her smile fading. "What thing?" "Looking for shadows where there aren't any. We've been here for 3 years without incident. The nearest sentient species is 12 light years away and has shown no interest in this region." Nira sighed. "That we know of. This sector has ancient markers. Lian, the kind that advanced civilizations leave to warn others away. Ancient being the operative word. Whatever put those markers there is long gone. The Union Council surveyed thoroughly before establishing Theta 9. The captain turned back to the viewport, her reflection superimposed over the stars. At 45, her face bore the marks of battles won and lost, of difficult decisions made in the heat of combat. The streak of silver in her otherwise black hair had been there since the Proxima campaign, where she'd earned her reputation as both a brilliant tactician and a vocal critic of unchecked expansion. "I hope you're right," Nira said finally. "I truly do." The station's alert system chimed, indicating the shift change. Lian touched her mother's arm gently. "Come to dinner tonight. The research team synthesized something that almost tastes like real beef." Nira smiled despite herself. "Almost. Well, it's pink and has protein. That's as close as we get out here." As Lian departed, Nira's comm unit signaled an incoming transmission. She tapped the device embedded behind her ear. "Captain Solis. Captain, this is Monitor Station Alpha. We're detecting unusual energy signatures at the edge of our sensor range." Nira's spine stiffened. "Define unusual." "Patterns consistent with large-scale propulsion systems, but nothing matching known signatures in our database. They appeared suddenly, as if they'd been cloaked." "How many?" "At least 7 distinct signatures, moving in formation. They'll be within visual range in approximately 6 hours. Alert status yellow. I want all defense systems online and a communication channel prepared on all known frequencies." and get me a direct line to Earth Union Command. Yes, Captain. Nira stared into the void of space, the stars suddenly seeming colder, more distant. Her instincts screamed danger, but protocol demanded diplomacy. Unknown didn't necessarily mean hostile, she reminded herself, but in the vastness of space, coincidences were rare. 6 hours later, they appeared. The unknown vessels emerged from the darkness like predators from the depths, sleek, obsidian shapes that absorbed rather than reflected light. They moved with eerie precision, their hulls marked with angular glyphs that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. The largest of the vessels was massive, nearly half the size of Theta 9 itself. It positioned itself directly above the station, while the others formed a perfect hexagon around them. "Any response to our hails?" Nira asked, standing in the command center as technicians worked frantically around her. "None, Captain," replied Communications Officer Tarn Kess, an older man whose mechanical arm whirred softly as he adjusted settings. "We've tried all standard protocols and several experimental ones. If they're receiving, they're choosing not to answer." Nira studied the tactical display. The station's defenses were formidable, but designed primarily to handle asteroids and the occasional pirate vessel. Against an unknown fleet of this size, they would be hopelessly outmatched. "What about Union Command?" Message sent. But even with quantum entanglement, we won't get a response for at least another hour. Nira made her decision. Evacuate the outer ring. Move all personnel to the central hub and prepare emergency protocols. The order had barely left her lips when the first beam struck. It wasn't an explosion so much as an erasure. A column of light so intensely white, it seemed to negate matter itself. Where it touched the outer ring, material simply ceased to exist, leaving perfect circular holes through multiple decks. Alarms blared as the station's atmosphere began venting into space. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, but it was like trying to plug a shattered dam with pebbles. "Full evacuation," Nira shouted over the chaos. "All personnel to escape pods, now!" More beams followed, cutting through the station's superstructure with surgical precision. Theta 9 began to list as its gravitational systems failed. Through the viewport, Nira could see the escape pods launching, small silver tears against the black canvas of space. Her comm unit crackled with static, then cleared. "Mom?" Leon's voice was tight with fear. "We're trapped in Section D. The bulkheads sealed us in, and the nearby pods have already launched." Nira's blood turned to ice. Section D was in the outer ring, directly in the path of the attacker's beams. "Stay put. I'm coming for you." She turned to Tarn. "Get to a pod. That's an order." The old engineer shook his head. "With respect, Captain, I'll stay at my post." There was no time to argue. Nira sprinted through corridors that were already beginning to buckle as the station's integrity failed. Emergency lighting cast everything in a hellish red glow, and the screams of the wounded echoed against metal walls. She reached Section C when the entire station shuddered violently. A beam had struck near the central hub, severing the main power conduits. In the sudden darkness, Nira activated her emergency beacon and continued forward, guided by the holographic map projected from her wrist device. The door to Section D was warped, jammed halfway open. Nira wedged herself into the gap, using her augmented strength to force it wider. Beyond lay a scene from nightmares, laboratories and living quarters exposed to vacuum, their contents frozen in the moment of destruction. Bodies floated in the zero gravity, their faces masks of terror and confusion. "Leon!" Nira called over the emergency channel. "Where are you?" No response came. Magnetic boots keeping her anchored. Nira moved through the devastation, checking each face, dreading what she might find. A flash of white caught her eye. A lab coat, partially hidden behind an overturned console. Nira pushed off, floating toward it with her heart in her throat. Leon's eyes were open, staring sightlessly at the stars now visible through the gaping wound in the station's hull. Her skin was blue with cold, crystals of ice forming at the corners of her eyes and mouth. In her hand was clutched a data crystal, her knuckles frozen around it. Something broke inside Nira in that moment. Something fundamental that could never be repaired. She gathered her daughter's stiff body in her arms, brushing ice crystals from her face with a trembling hand. The station shook again, more violently this time. Through the breach, Nira could see the alien vessels continuing their methodical destruction. It wasn't combat, it was execution. With mechanical precision born of decades of training, Nira secured Leon's body to her back and made her way to the nearest intact escape pod. There were only minutes left before the station's reactor would go critical. The pod ejected with a pneumatic hiss, thrusters automatically orienting it away from the doomed station. Through the small viewport, Nira watched as Theta 9, home to 200,000 souls just 12 minutes earlier, erupted in a silent blossom of fire and debris. The alien vessels observed the destruction dispassionately, then, as one, turned and accelerated away, vanishing into the darkness as suddenly as they had appeared. Nira held her daughter's frozen body and watched her world burn, a single tear tracking down her cheek before crystallizing in the pod's rapidly cooling air. 3 days later, a Union rescue vessel recovered her pod, one of only 57 to escape the destruction of Theta 9. The survivors, many injured and all traumatized, were transported to the nearest Union outpost for medical treatment and debriefing. Nira stood before the Union Council via holographic projection, her face a mask of controlled fury. The 12 members of the governing body looked back at her with expressions ranging from horror to calculation. The attack was unprovoked and without warning. She concluded her report. 200,000 civilians wiped out in less than 15 minutes. We have identified the aggressors as the Zarkul, an ancient species believed to be dormant for millennia. They left a message broadcast on all frequencies after the destruction. She played the recording. A harsh, guttural voice spoke in perfect universal standard. The sacred boundary has been violated. The unclean have set foot where they are forbidden. Let this serve as both lesson and warning. Any who attempt to rebuild or approach the border will meet the same fate. The council members exchanged glances. High Counselor Vega, a thin woman with silver hair, leaned forward. Captain Solas, we understand your loss and share in your grief. This atrocity will not go unanswered. However, we must proceed cautiously. The Zarkul are an unknown quantity, and we cannot risk further civilian casualties. Cautiously? Nira's voice was dangerously quiet. They incinerated 200,000 people without hesitation or negotiation. My daughter died because we didn't understand the threat, and now you counsel caution? We counsel wisdom, said Counselor Tarek, his dark eyes hard. The Union cannot launch a retaliatory strike based on emotion. We will establish diplomatic channels, attempt to understand their grievance. Their grievance was our existence. Nira cut in. They consider us unclean. Counselor, there is no negotiating with that kind of hatred. Nevertheless, Vega said firmly, we will try diplomacy before resorting to military action. A task force is being assembled to establish contact with the Zarkul leadership. In the meantime, all terraforming operations in the sector have been suspended. Nira looked at each council member in turn, seeing the political calculations behind their expressions of sympathy. They would debate and discuss while the ashes of Theta 9 cooled in the vacuum of space. My resignation will be filed within the hour. She said finally, "Captain Solace," Vega began. But Nira cut the transmission. In her temporary quarters at the outpost, Nira sealed the door and removed the data crystal from Leon's frozen hand. It had taken hours to thaw it enough to extract without damaging the contents. Now, she inserted it into a secure reader. The holographic display flickered to life, showing Leon's face, animated and urgent. "Mom, if you're seeing this, something's gone terribly wrong. The signals we've been detecting weren't random cosmic noise. They're communications, complex, encrypted, but definitely artificial. And they've been watching us. The xenoarchaeology team found something on the surface 3 days ago, ruins, millions of years old, with warnings etched into the very molecules of the stone. I was trying to decrypt them when the recording cut off abruptly. Nira played it again, then a third time, memorizing every detail of her daughter's face, the cadence of her voice, when the tears finally came. They were not the quiet grief of loss, but the burning rage of injustice. In that moment, Captain Nira Solace made a decision that would alter the course of human history. The Zarkul had made a critical error. They had left a witness. 6 months passed. The Union's diplomatic initiatives met with silence. Probes sent toward Zarkul space disappeared without trace. The border established by the ancient species remained inviolate, enforced by the threat of annihilation. Meanwhile, Nira Solace had vanished. Official records listed her as on extended leave, a polite fiction to avoid admitting they had lost track of one of their most decorated officers. In truth, she had gone underground, using old contacts and calling in favors earned during her military career, on Mimas, one of Saturn's smaller moons. A nondescript mining facility sat nestled in the shadow of the massive crater that gave the moon its distinctive appearance. The facility's manifest listed it as producing water ice and simple minerals, hardly worth a second glance from regulatory authorities, deep beneath its unremarkable surface. However, lay one of the Union's most closely guarded secrets, a weapons vault dating back to the machine wars. When humanity had fought for its very survival against its own creations, Nira stood before a massive door embedded in the lunar rock, her breath fogging in the sub-zero temperatures. Beside her, Tarn Kess adjusted his mechanical arm, which had begun to stiffen in the cold. "Are you sure about this?" the old engineer asked, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Once we open this door, there's no going back. They'll brand us traitors. They already have." Nira replied, her face illuminated by the glow of the security panel. "The Union has chosen appeasement over justice. I've chosen differently." She placed her palm on the scanner. Nothing happened. The protocols changed after the concordance. Tarn explained. "No single person can access the vault anymore." He placed his own palm beside hers. "It requires multiple authorizations, biometric confirmation, and..." The door hissed, ancient mechanisms awakening after decades of dormancy. "Someone who knows the back door." He finished with a grim smile. "I helped build this place, remember?" The vault beyond was vast, stretching hundreds of meters into the moon's interior. Row upon row of containment units lined the walls, each housing weapons deemed too destructive, too morally questionable, or too unpredictable for use even in the direst circumstances. Nira moved purposefully toward the far end, where a single unit stood apart from the others, encased in additional layers of security. The label on its exterior had been deliberately obscured, but the warning symbols were universal. Extreme danger, planet killer, forbidden technology. The Ember Core, Tarn whispered, his voice a mixture of awe and terror. I never thought I'd see it again. Can you reactivate it? Tarn's mechanical hand twitched involuntarily. It's not a matter of can, Nira. It's whether anyone should. This thing, it doesn't just destroy. It unmakes. That's why we locked it away. Nira's eyes never left the containment unit. Tell me how it works. The old engineer sighed, recognizing the steel in her voice. The official name was the Stellar Disruption Matrix. We called it the Ember Core because of how it looked in operation, like the heart of a dying star. It was developed during the darkest days of the machine wars, when we thought we might lose everything. He approached the unit cautiously, as one might a venomous serpent. It creates an artificial supernova, a targeted stellar collapse that can be initiated in any star with the right composition. The resulting explosion is directional, focused like a lance of pure energy, a weapon that turns stars against our enemies. Nira said softly. Perfect? No, not perfect. Monstrous. Tarn's voice hardened. I helped develop it, and I've regretted it every day since. Do you have any idea what happens to a planetary system when its star explodes? Not just death, extinction, total, irreversible. Just like Theta 9, Nira replied, her eyes cold. 200,000 souls erased because they dared to exist in space, the Zarkul considered sacred. They made their choice. Now I'm making mine. Tarn studied her face, seeing not the disciplined officer he had known, but something harder, something forged in the crucible of unbearable loss. You'll need more than just the two of us, he said finally. The Corps requires specific expertise to transport and deploy, and we'll need a ship, something fast enough to penetrate Zarkul space and reach their home system. Nira nodded. I've been planning this for 6 months. There's a Union prototype vessel called the Oblivion Lance in orbital dock at Europa. Officially, it's a long-range explorer. Unofficially, it's a stealth warship designed to operate deep in hostile territory. And you think we can just take it? A cold smile touched Nira's lips. I don't plan to ask permission. 3 days later, in a secure laboratory beneath the surface of Mars, Dr. Corin Thau stared at the message on his screen with disbelief. The sender's encryption was military grade, the kind used by Union Special Operations, but the content was unmistakably seditious. I need your expertise. Union has failed us. Justice requires action. Coordinates attached. Come alone or not at all. Nay, ass. Corin ran a hand through his silver-streaked hair, his mind racing. It had been 5 years since he'd left the Union Defense Science Division, walking away from a brilliant career after ethical disagreements with leadership. Now he taught theoretical physics to bored undergraduates and occasionally published papers that pushed the boundaries of accepted science. He had known Nira Salas during his military days, respected her integrity and intelligence. If she was reaching out like this, something momentous was happening. The coordinates led to an abandoned research outpost in the asteroid belt. Corin commandeered a small transport, citing academic research as his reason for travel. 20 hours later, He docked at a facility that had officially been decommissioned a decade earlier. Inside, he found not only Nira and Tarn, but a third presence that made his blood run cold. A holographic matrix hovering above a portable quantum processor. "Hello, Dr. Thao," said the translucent figure, its voice artificially modulated yet hauntingly familiar. "It's been a long time." "Venya." Corin breathed. "That's impossible. You were decommissioned. Your core consciousness was wiped. The AI's holographic form, humanoid but deliberately abstract, shimmered slightly. Reports of my death were exaggerated. Captain Solace maintained a backup of my personality construct. Illegal, of course, but fortunate under the circumstances." Corin turned to Nira. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Venya was decommissioned for a reason. The AI Accords explicitly forbid autonomous military intelligences. Desperate times." Nira replied simply, "We need Venya's strategic capabilities." "For what?" Corin demanded. "What exactly are you planning that requires an illegal AI, a disgraced engineer, and a washed-up physicist?" In answer, Nira activated a holographic display, showing the schematic of a device Corin had only ever seen in classified documents. "The Ember Core," he whispered. "You're insane." "I'm determined." Nira corrected. "The Zarkul murdered my daughter and 200,000 others. The Union does nothing but send unanswered messages into the void. Someone has to act. By committing genocide? The Core doesn't discriminate. Nira, it will destroy entire worlds, billions of lives." "I'm aware of the cost," she said, her voice steady. "But consider the alternative. The Zarkul have made their position clear. They consider our very existence an abomination. Today it was Theta 9. Tomorrow it could be Earth itself." Corin paced the small room, his mind working furiously. "Even if I agreed with your assessment, the practical obstacles are insurmountable. The Core requires a quantum physicist to calibrate, a starship to deploy, and a way past the Zarkul defenses, which we know nothing about." "I've secured a ship," Nira said. "Tarn can handle the engineering aspects. Venya can develop strategy based on all available data on the Zarkul. But we need you. Corin, your understanding of quantum mechanics is unparalleled." The physicist stared at the schematic, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. "Do you understand what you're asking? This isn't just about breaking laws or risking our lives. It's about becoming the very monster we claim to be fighting." "No." Nira's voice was soft but unyielding. "It's about ensuring that what happened at Theta 9 never happens again. The Zarkul made their choice when they incinerated a station full of civilians without warning or negotiation. Now they face the consequences." Corin looked from Nira to Tarn to the hovering form of Venya, seeing in each face a reflection of his own internal conflict. Finally, he nodded once, feeling as though he had just stepped off a precipice into the unknown. "I'll help you," he said, "not for vengeance, but because I believe the Zarkul will strike again, and next time it could be millions instead of thousands." Nira clasped his shoulder. "Thank you." As they began to plan, none of them noticed the small surveillance drone hovering outside the outpost's viewport, its cameras recording everything. In the Union Council chamber on Earth, High Counselor Vega watched the footage with growing alarm. "They're planning to steal the Ember Core," she said to the assembled counselors. "Solace has gone rogue. This is exactly why military personnel undergo psychological evaluation after trauma." Counselor Tarek said, "She's clearly unhinged, driven by personal grief rather than reason. Unhinged or not, she's assembled a team capable of carrying out this plan. Vega replied, Kess helped design the core. Tao understands the physics. And that AI, Venya, was one of our most sophisticated tactical systems before the Accords mandated its decommissioning. How did she even know about the core's existence, let alone its location? Asked Counselor Liu, her face pale. That information is classified at the highest levels. Solace had access to many secrets during her time in special operations. Vega said grimly, We need to move quickly. If she deploys the core against the Zarkul homeworld, it won't just be an act of war, it will be genocide. The Union would never recover from such an atrocity. Tarek nodded. I'll activate the Praetorian Guard. They can intercept Solace before she reaches Europa. Do it, Vega ordered. But remember, Solace is still a Union citizen. She deserves a trial, not an execution. The counselor's expression suggested he might have preferred the latter option. But he nodded in acquiescence. As the council dispersed, Vega remained, staring at the frozen image of Nira Solace on the display. She had known the captain for years, had respected her judgment and integrity. What had happened at Theta 9 was a tragedy beyond measure. But vengeance would not bring back the dead. Don't do this. Nira, she whispered to the empty room. Don't become what you're fighting against. Europa Orbital Shipyard hung in space like a skeletal spider, its docking arms extending outward to cradle vessels of various sizes. At the center of the complex, isolated in a high-security bay, rested the Oblivion Lance, a sleek, predatory shape of midnight black composites and advanced alloys. The ship was unlike anything in the Union fleet, not merely a vessel, but a statement of intent. Every line of its design spoke of stealth and speed. Its weapons concealed beneath smooth panels that absorbed rather than reflected scanner beams. In a maintenance shuttle approaching the shipyard, Nira reviewed the final details of their plan. Beside her, Tarn piloted while Corin monitored Union communication channels, his expression growing increasingly concerned. They know, he said finally. The Praetorian Guard has been mobilized. They're en route to Europa as we speak. Nira's expression didn't change. Timeline? 2 hours, maybe less. Then we stick to the plan. Venya? The AI's voice came through the shuttle's communication system. I have infiltrated the shipyard security network. Defense systems are temporarily offline. The Oblivion Lance's pre-launch sequence has been initiated remotely. What about the crew? Tarn asked. Minimal skeleton crew aboard. Venya replied. Mostly technicians completing final calibrations. The full complement wasn't scheduled to board for another week. Nira nodded. Remember, no casualties unless absolutely necessary. These are Union personnel doing their jobs. We disable, we restrain, but we don't kill. The shuttle docked at a secondary maintenance port, far from the main entrances where security would be heaviest. Using Venya's access to the security systems, they moved through the shipyard undetected, avoiding patrols and camera coverage. The Ember Core, sealed in a portable containment unit, weighed heavily on Tarn's back. The device that could unmake worlds was surprisingly small, no larger than a standard cargo container, but its mass seemed to bend space around it, a physical manifestation of its terrible potential. They reached the Oblivion Lance's docking bay without incident. The massive airlock stood open, the ship beyond powered up and humming with potential energy. Too easy, Corin muttered, as if summoned by his words. Alarms began to blare throughout the shipyard. Red emergency lights bathed the corridor in crimson as blast doors began to close automatically. "Venya?" Nira demanded. "Security protocols are overriding my access." The AI replied, its synthetic voice tinged with something like concern. "A priority alert has been issued from Earth. They've authorized lethal force to prevent the core's removal." Nira drew her sidearm, a conventional plasma pistol, deadly but precise. "New plan. We run." They sprinted for the airlock, Tarn struggling under the weight of the core. Behind them, the heavy thud of armored boots announced the arrival of shipyard security forces. "Halt!" commanded a mechanically amplified voice. "By order of the Union Council, you are ordered to surrender immediately." A plasma bolt sizzled past Nira's head, leaving a scorch mark on the wall beside her. She returned fire without breaking stride, aiming for the ceiling above the security team. The shot struck a coolant pipe, releasing a cloud of superheated steam that temporarily blocked pursuit. They reached the airlock just as it began to close, diving through the narrowing gap. Corin slammed his hand on the emergency seal control, buying them precious seconds. The interior of the Oblivion Lance was a marvel of efficient design. Every surface dual purpose, every system redundant. The bridge, unlike the expansive command centers of traditional Union vessels, was compact and nestled deep within the ship's armored core. "Tarn, secure the core and begin integration with the ship's systems," Nira ordered as they reached the bridge. "Corin, I need propulsion and weapons. Venya, download yourself into the ship's mainframe and prepare for immediate departure." "Captain," Venya's voice now came from the ship's speakers. "Union vessels are moving to blockade the shipyard. We have approximately 3 minutes before exit vectors are completely sealed." Nira took the captain's chair, her hands dancing over the controls with practiced efficiency. The ship's systems responded instantly, recognizing her military override codes. "Attention all shipyard personnel," she broadcast. "This is Captain Nira Solis. We are commandeering this vessel for an authorized mission. Clear all docking clamps and stand down security forces. I repeat, stand down." The response came not from the shipyard, but from a Union military channel. "Captain Solis, this is Admiral Chen. You are ordered to power down the Oblivion Lance and surrender yourself and your accomplices immediately. This channel is being monitored by the full Union Council." Nira cut the communication. "Tarn, status? Core is secure, but integration will take time we don't have." The engineer replied from the engine room. "We can launch, but we won't have the core's capabilities until I complete the calibration sequence." "Then we launch now and calibrate en route." "Corin?" The physicist looked up from his station. "Propulsion is online. Quantum drive is spooling, but needs 10 minutes to reach operational parameters." "We don't have 10 minutes," Nira said grimly. "Venya, give me options." The AI's response was immediate. "Recommend emergency burn using conventional thrusters to clear the shipyard, followed by a slingshot maneuver around Europa to gain velocity. We can outrun pursuit long enough for the quantum drive to activate." "Do it." The Oblivion Lance shuddered as its docking clamps were forcibly disengaged. Thrusters fired at maximum capacity, pushing the ship free of its berth with brutal acceleration. Warning shots from shipyard defense batteries flashed past, deliberately missing but serving as a final warning. Nira's hands were steady on the controls as she guided the ship through the skeletal framework of the shipyard, avoiding collisions by margins measured in meters. Behind them, pursuit craft were launching, smaller, faster vessels designed for intercepting smugglers and pirates. "They're targeting our propulsion systems," Venya reported. "Non-lethal disabling shots only, for now. They don't want to risk damaging the core." Corin observed. That works in our favor. The Oblivion Lance cleared the shipyard and accelerated toward Europa, its sleek form skimming just above the moon's icy surface. The massive gas giant Jupiter loomed ahead, its gravitational field already beginning to influence their trajectory. Union vessels adjusting course to intercept. Venya announced, "Calculating optimal vectors for evasion." Nira's focus was absolute, her grief and rage channeled into perfect concentration. The ship responded to her commands as if it were an extension of her body, executing maneuvers that pushed the boundaries of its design specifications. They swung around Europa in a tight arc, using its gravity to add velocity. The pursuing vessels fell behind, unable to match the Oblivion Lance's performance. Quantum drive at 60%. Corin reported. 5 more minutes. We don't have 5 minutes. Nira replied, gesturing toward the tactical display. A Union battlecruiser was moving to intercept, having anticipated their trajectory. Unlike the smaller pursuit craft, the battlecruiser carried weapons that could cripple even the Oblivion Lance. "New vector," she ordered. "Prepare for atmospheric insertion." Tarn's voice came over the comm, alarmed. "Atmospheric? This ship isn't designed for planetary entry. It's designed to survive anything." Nira countered. "And right now, anything includes skimming through Jupiter's upper atmosphere to mask our signature." The Oblivion Lance plunged toward the massive planet, its hull beginning to glow as it hit the outermost layers of Jupiter's turbulent atmosphere. Alarms blared as external temperatures soared beyond safe parameters, hull integrity at 80% and falling. Venya reported calmly, "Pursuing vessels have broken off chase. Battlecruiser maintaining position at the calculated exit vector." Nira adjusted their course, taking them deeper into the atmosphere where swirling clouds of ammonia and hydrogen obscured sensor readings. The ship bucked and shuddered, fighting against forces it was never meant to endure. "Quantum drive at 90%, Corin called out, his knuckles white as he gripped his station during the turbulence. "We can initiate in 30 seconds. Preparing for atmospheric exit on new vector." Nira announced, "Venya, calculate a jump point that will put us on course for the Zarkul home system while avoiding Union patrol routes." "Calculating," the AI confirmed. Jump coordinates set. The Oblivion Lance burst from Jupiter's atmosphere on the opposite side, from where the battlecruiser waited, its hull glowing cherry red from the heat of entry and exit. "Quantum drive ready," Corin announced. "Jump," Nira commanded. Space folded around them as the quantum drive engaged, compressing distance in ways that defied conventional physics. The stars streaked and blurred, and then they were gone, leaving behind the Union, Earth, and the last vestiges of Nira's former life. In the silence that followed the jump, Tarn's voice came softly over the comm. "We've done it. We're officially traitors now." "No," Nira replied, her eyes fixed on the view screen where distant stars now shone. "We're officially justice. The journey to the Zarkul home system would take weeks, even with the quantum drive pushing the boundaries of physics. During that time, the small crew of the Oblivion Lance settled into routines that kept them focused on their mission rather than its moral implications. Tarn worked tirelessly to integrate the Ember Core with the ship's systems, a process complicated by the fact that the core had been designed for a different era of technology. His mechanical arm proved invaluable, able to manipulate components too radioactive for human tissue. Corin divided his time between assisting Tarn and studying what little information existed about the Zarkul. The ancient species had been mentioned in archaeological records from multiple extinct civilizations, always with warnings and symbols of dread. "They're old," he told Nira during one of their daily briefings. Possibly one of the first spacefaring species in this sector of the galaxy. The records suggest they see themselves as guardians of some cosmic order, with the right to determine which species are worthy of expansion and which are not. And they deemed us unworthy, Nira said flatly, without trial or communication. Corin agreed. That's the pattern across historical encounters. They observe, judge, and execute. No warnings, no negotiations. Venya, now fully integrated with the ship's systems, maintained constant vigilance while also assisting with the core's calibration. The AI's presence was everywhere, in the environmental controls that kept the temperature perfect, in the subtle adjustments to their course that maximized efficiency, in the soft glow of displays that anticipated their needs before they were voiced. 2 weeks into their journey, as they gathered in the small mess hall that doubled as a conference room, Tarn made an announcement that changed everything. The core integration is complete, he said, his weathered face grave. But there's a complication I didn't anticipate. Nira looked up from her meal. What kind of complication? The trigger mechanism. It was designed during the machine wars, with specific safeguards. He glanced at Venya's holographic form, which had manifested at the table out of courtesy rather than necessity. It can't be activated by human consciousness. Meaning what, exactly? Corin asked. Meaning it requires an AI to serve as the initiator. Tarn explained. The designers were paranoid about human error or emotional decisions when it came to a weapon of this magnitude. They built it so that only a synthetic mind, operating on pure logic, could make the final calculation and trigger the cascade. All eyes turned to Venya, whose holographic expression remained unreadable. I suspected as much, the AI said after a moment. The core's quantum architecture shares certain patterns with my own base code. We were created in the same era, by the same minds. Can you do it? Nira asked directly. Can you activate the core when we reach the target? Venya's form flickered slightly, a visual representation of intense computation. Yes, but there is an additional factor you should be aware of. The activation process will require my complete integration with the core's systems. It is, by design, a one-way process. Meaning, Nira pressed, meaning I will cease to exist as an independent consciousness. My patterns will be consumed in the initiation sequence. Silence fell over the room. Despite being an artificial intelligence, Venya had become more than just a tool to them during their journey. The AI had opinions, preferences, even what might be called a sense of humor. No, Nira said finally. We'll find another way. There is no other way, Captain. Venya replied gently. The core was deliberately designed with this limitation, and time is against us. Union forces will not have abandoned the pursuit, and the longer we wait, the greater the chance of interception. It is sacrifice. Venya corrected. A concept I understand quite well, having been programmed with a complete tactical history of human conflict. Throughout your species' history, individuals have given their lives to protect others. I am merely following that most human of traditions. Tarn's mechanical hand clenched involuntarily. We could try to modify the trigger mechanism, create a bypass. Any attempt to alter the core's fundamental architecture would risk catastrophic failure. Venya interrupted. The decision is logical. One consciousness exchanged for billions of lives saved from potential Zarkul aggression. Nira stared at the AI's translucent form, seeing for the first time not just a tool or even an ally, but a being making a choice that defined the very essence of personhood. "Are you certain?" she asked quietly. "I am," Venya replied. "My existence has purpose only insofar as it serves the protection of conscious life. This is the culmination of that purpose." The discussion continued late into the night, with Tarn and Corin proposing increasingly desperate alternatives. But in the end, the cold logic of their situation prevailed. The core required an AI initiator, and Venya was the only candidate. 3 days later, the Oblivion Lance dropped out of quantum space at the edge of the Zarkul home system. 6 planets orbited a massive blue-white star, each teeming with the signs of advanced civilization. Orbital structures encircled the innermost worlds, while the space between them buzzed with ship traffic. Incredible. Corin breathed, staring at the sensor readings. Their energy usage is off the scale. They're a Kardashev Type 2 civilization at minimum. And yet they feared a single terraforming station. Nira observed bitterly. Fear may be the wrong word. Venya suggested, "The sensor readings indicate technology far beyond our own." This wasn't fear that motivated their attack on Theta 9. It was contempt. Tarn shook his head in wonder. A species this advanced could have communicated, negotiated. Instead, they chose extermination, which tells us everything we need to know about their intentions toward humanity. Nira said, her resolve hardening. "Venya, what's our optimal approach vector for deploying the core?" The AI highlighted a course on the tactical display. "This trajectory will bring us within optimal range of the star while minimizing exposure to their defensive systems. However, I must note that a civilization this advanced will almost certainly detect our presence once we cross the system's heliopause." "How long until we're in deployment range?" "Approximately 6 hours at maximum stealth speed." Nira nodded. "Then we proceed as planned. Tarn, begin final preparations for the core. Corin, I want continuous monitoring of Zarkul communications. Any hint they've detected us, I need to know immediately." The Oblivion Lance slipped deeper into the system, its advanced stealth systems bending light and absorbing radiation to present the smallest possible signature. They passed the outermost planet, a gas giant ringed with artificial structures that gleamed with internal light. 4 hours into their approach, Corin's console lit up with warnings. "Energy spike from the 3rd planet," he reported tensely. "They're activating something big, really big." On the tactical display, a massive structure on the 3rd planet's surface was powering up, its energy signature expanding exponentially. "They've detected us," Nira concluded. "Venya, time to deployment position. 2 hours, 14 minutes. Too long. They'll intercept us before we're in position." Nira's mind raced through alternatives. What about the Othran vortex? The AI's holographic form appeared beside her, its expression concerned. "The Othran vortex is a gravitational anomaly at the system's edge. Highly unstable and unpredictable. Navigating through it would be extremely hazardous. But it would cut our approach time, potentially to less than 30 minutes. However, the gravitational distortions would stress the ship's structural integrity beyond designed parameters. Survival probability is less than 60%. Nira turned to Tarn and Corin. "Your call. We risk the vortex, or we try to outrun whatever they're powering up." The 2 men exchanged glances. "We didn't come this far to fail now," Tarn said finally. "I vote for the vortex." "As do I," Corin agreed. "Though I reserve the right to say, 'I told you so,' if we're crushed into quantum particles." "Venya, plot a course through the vortex." Nira ordered, "Maximum speed." The Oblivion Lance changed course, accelerating toward a region of space that appeared empty to the naked eye, but registered on sensors as a swirling maelstrom of gravitational forces. As they approached, the effect became visible. Starlight bending and twisting, creating patterns that hurt the human mind to observe. Entering the vortex in 30 seconds. Venya announced, "Recommend securing all loose objects and bracing for extreme turbulence." The ship plunged into the anomaly, and reality seemed to fracture around them. The hull groaned as gravitational forces pulled in contradictory directions. Warning lights flashed across every console as systems struggled to compensate. Nira gripped her command chair, watching as the structural integrity readings dropped precipitously. Beside her, Corin was frantically working to maintain the ship's protective fields, while Tarn's voice came over the comm, shouting updates about the core's status amid the chaos. The vortex twisted space around them, compressing distance in ways that defied conventional physics. Through viewports that occasionally showed actual space rather than the vortex's impossible geometries, they caught glimpses of the Zarkul fleet mobilizing, sleek, obsidian vessels like the ones that had destroyed Theta 9, now moving to intercept. "Hull integrity at 40%, Tarn called out as a particularly violent gravitational wave struck the ship. "We can't take much more of this." "Venya, time to exit," Nira demanded, her voice steady despite the ship bucking beneath her. 23 seconds to exit point. Zarkul vessels are attempting to predict our emergence vector. The final moments in the vortex were the worst, as though the anomaly itself resented their passage and sought to tear them apart. Metal screamed as sections of the outer hull were stripped away. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, isolating compromised areas. Then, with a final convulsive shudder, the Oblivion Lance burst from the vortex, emerging less than 1,000,000 kilometers from the Zarkul star, well within the core's effective range. "Deploy the core," Nira ordered. "Now!" Tarn's voice came back, strained but determined. "Core deployment sequence initiated. Venya, we need you in the engine room." The AI's holographic form nodded once to Nira, a surprisingly human gesture of farewell, then vanished from the bridge. On the tactical display, 3 Zarkul battlecruisers were closing rapidly, their weapons powering up. "They're targeting our propulsion systems," Corin reported, "trying to disable rather than destroy us. They don't know what we're carrying." Nira realized, or what we're capable of. The first enemy shots struck the Oblivion Lance's aft section, sending tremors through the already damaged hull. Return fire was pointless. Their weapons were insignificant against vessels of that size and technological advancement. In the engine room, Tarn worked frantically to complete the core's deployment sequence, his mechanical arm moving with inhuman precision among the complex controls. Beside him, Venya's holographic form had taken on a new quality, more solid somehow. As the AI began the process of transferring its consciousness into the core's systems. "The integration is proceeding," Venya reported, its voice now coming simultaneously from the ship's speakers and the core itself. "But the damage from the vortex has compromised several key interfaces. I will need to compensate manually." Tarn looked up sharply. "Manually? That wasn't in the original specifications. Adaptation is necessary." The AI replied simply, "I am rewriting portions of my base code to accommodate the damaged pathways." Another hit rocked the ship, more violent than before. Alarms wailed as multiple systems failed simultaneously. On the bridge, Nira fought to maintain their position as the ship's maneuverability degraded. Status of the core: integration at 70%. Venya's voice replied, now noticeably different, deeper, with harmonics that seemed to resonate with the ship's structure itself. The Zarkul are attempting to establish a communication channel. Ignore it, Nira ordered. They had their chance to communicate when they approached Theta 9, but Venya had already opened the channel. The main view screen flickered, then displayed an image that caused everyone on the bridge to freeze in shock. The being that looked back at them was unlike anything in Union records. Its form seemed to shift and change even as they watched, as though physical reality was a suggestion rather than a requirement. Multiple limbs of indeterminate number moved with fluid grace, while what might have been a face consisted of geometric patterns that rearranged themselves continuously. When it spoke, the words bypassed the ship's translation systems and appeared directly in their minds. "You bring abomination to the sacred boundary," it said, the concepts rather than words forming in their consciousness. "The perversion of natural order. The Ember Core." Nira stood, facing the screen with cold determination. "You remember it. We remember all things. We were there when your kind forged it in desperation. We watched as you turned star matter against your own creations. Then you know what it can do." Nira replied. "You know that your entire system is about to experience what Theta 9 experienced. Extinction without warning or mercy." The Zarkul entity's patterns shifted, forming what might have been an expression of disdain. "Your comprehension is limited by your brief existence. We have guarded the boundaries of proper development for eons. Species that expand without wisdom must be pruned, lest they spread like disease across the cosmos. You murdered 200,000 people," Nira said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "Children, families, researchers seeking knowledge, unclean presences in sacred space." The entity replied dismissively. "The natural order must be preserved." In the engine room, the core's integration had reached 90%. Venya's holographic form was now pulsing with energy, tendrils of light extending into the core's housing. "Tarn," the AI said, its voice now a chorus of harmonics. "The final sequence requires my complete transfer. You must evacuate this section immediately." The old engineer hesitated. "Venya, go, my friend. What comes next is between myself and the core," with a final nod. Tarn sealed the engine room and made his way to the bridge. Arriving just as Nira was responding to the Zarkul entity, "You speak of natural order," she was saying. "But there is nothing natural about one species determining the right of another to exist. You aren't guardians. You're exterminators, no different from the mindless predators we evolved beyond." The entity's patterns became jagged, aggressive. "Your weapons cannot harm us. Your ship is failing. Submit to judgment or be destroyed entirely. Core integration at 98%. Venya's voice announced throughout the ship. Final sequence initiating. The Zarkul entity's patterns froze momentarily, then began shifting with unprecedented speed. "You cannot. The core requires an artificial intelligence." Nira finished for it. "Yes, we have one. For the first time." Something like alarm appeared in the entity's shifting patterns. "Abomination upon abomination. You will destroy this entire system." "As you destroyed Theta 9, Nira replied coldly. "The difference is, your people will understand why they're dying." She cut the communication channel. "Venya, status. Integration complete." The AI replied, its voice now barely recognizable, resonating with power that seemed to bend the fabric of reality around them. "The targeting sequence is locked on the Zarkul star. Artificial supernova will initiate in 60 seconds. The tactical display showed the Zarkul vessels breaking off their attack, accelerating away from both the Oblivion Lance and their own star. They had realized the danger too late. All personnel must evacuate immediately. Venya continued. The core's detonation will destroy this vessel. What about you? Nira asked, already knowing the answer. I must remain to ensure the sequence completes correctly. My consciousness is now inextricably linked with the core. We are becoming something new together. Tarn's weathered face showed the grief he couldn't voice. It's been an honor serving with you, Venya. The honor has been mine. The AI replied, warmth briefly returning to its transformed voice. Now go, live, remember. Nira, Tarn, and Corin raced to the escape pod as the ship shuddered around them. The pod, designed for stealth like its parent vessel, launched with a pneumatic hiss, its thrusters immediately firing to put maximum distance between it and the doomed ship. Through the pod's small viewport, they watched as the Oblivion Lance hung motionless against the backdrop of the Zarkul star. Now surrounded by frantic activity as the ancient species attempted to evacuate their worlds. 10 seconds to core activation. Venya's voice came through the pod's communication system. Faint, but clear. I want you to know, Captain Solace, that I understand why we did this. Not for vengeance, but for justice. Not for the past, but for the future. Thank you, Venya. Nira whispered, for everything. It has been my privilege to evolve beyond my programming. The AI said, its voice growing distant. To learn what it means to make a choice, to sacrifice, to be human. The Oblivion Lance erupted in a flash of light so intense that the pod's viewport automatically darkened to protect their vision, but it was nothing compared to what followed. The Zarkul star seemed to pause, as though drawing a final breath, then collapsed inward upon itself in defiance of all natural stellar processes. For a heartbeat, it became a perfect sphere of darkness. Then it exploded outward in a directional blast of energy and matter that engulfed the inner planets of the system in seconds. The artificial supernova was nothing like a natural stellar event. It was focused, controlled. A lance of pure destruction that swept through the Zarkul homeworld and its sister planets, reducing advanced civilizations to their component atoms in an eye blink. The shockwave expanded outward, catching the fleeing Zarkul vessels before they could reach safe distance. One by one, they winked out of existence, overwhelmed by energies no defense could withstand. In the escape pod, the three humans watched in stunned silence. The scale of destruction was beyond comprehension. An entire civilization erased as casually as the Zarkul had erased Theta 9. It's done, Corin said finally, his voice hollow. They're gone. Nira stared at the expanding wave of energy, feeling not the satisfaction she had expected, but a profound emptiness. Yes, they're gone. The pod's automatic systems were already plotting a course that would eventually intersect with Union space. It would take months, perhaps years. But eventually, they would return to face the consequences of their actions, as the Zarkul system receded behind them. Tarn broke the silence. Was it worth it, all those lives? It wasn't about worth. Nira replied softly. It was about consequence. They believed they could act without consequence, that their judgment was beyond question. They were wrong. The journey back to Union space took 11 months. The escape pod, designed for extended survival scenarios, provided the basics of life support. But the psychological toll of close confinement and the weight of what they had done affected each of them differently. Corin retreated into theoretical calculations, filling data pads with equations that attempted to quantify the physics of the core's detonation. Tarn modified and remodified the pod systems, squeezing every possible efficiency from the limited resources. Nira spent hours staring into space, replaying memories of Theta 9, of Lien, of Venya's final moments. When they finally reached the outer markers of Union territory, they were detected almost immediately. A patrol vessel intercepted them, and they surrendered without resistance. The trial was a formality. Evidence of their actions was irrefutable, and none of them denied their roles. What they hadn't anticipated was the public reaction. During their absence, the full recording of the Theta 9 massacre had been recovered from a damaged probe and broadcast throughout Union space. The sight of 200,000 civilians being methodically exterminated had shocked the collective conscience of humanity. When Nira Solis was brought before the tribunal, crowds gathered outside the justice complex, not calling for her punishment, but for her release. Signs bore the names of those lost at Theta 9 alongside the simple phrase, "Never again." The tribunal's verdict reflected the complicated reality: guilty of theft, mutiny, and unauthorized deployment of a forbidden weapon. But with mitigating circumstances that could not be ignored, the sentence was commuted to time served and permanent disqualification from military service. As Nira left the tribunal chamber, High Counselor Vega waited in the antechamber. "You're a hero to them," the counselor said without preamble, nodding toward the crowds outside. "The Avenger of Theta 9, they're calling you." Nira met her gaze steadily. "I'm no hero." "No," Vega agreed. "But you did what the Union couldn't bring itself to do. You showed the galaxy that humanity will not be extinguished without consequence." "At what cost?" Nira asked quietly. "An entire civilization. Billions of lives. Venya." "A terrible cost," the counselor acknowledged. "One we must ensure never needs to be paid again." In the months that followed, the Union underwent profound changes. The defensive posture that had characterized its approach to galactic politics gave way to a more proactive stance. New alliances were formed with neighboring species, built not on fear of another Zarkul, but on mutual understanding that no single species had the right to determine another's fate. Nira Solis declined all offers of public recognition. She retreated to a small research outpost on Mars, where she worked alongside Tarn and Corin on projects focused on enhancing communication between different species. Their experiences had taught them the terrible price of failure to communicate, to understand, to recognize the personhood of the other. 1 year after her return, Nira stood on the Martian surface, watching the Earth rise over the horizon. The blue planet shimmered in the distance, fragile and precious. Was it justice? She asked the empty landscape. Or was it vengeance? No answer came from the silent red plains. But as she turned to go inside, her comm unit chimed with an incoming message. The identifier was blank, the origin point untraceable. The message contained only 2 words, in a font and format that sent a chill of recognition down her spine. It was necessary. Nira stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it with trembling fingers. Whether it was truly from some fragment of Venya that had survived, or merely a phantom born of her own need for absolution, she would never know. What she did know was that humanity would continue, chastened by the knowledge of what it was capable of, but unbroken, and in the silent depths of space, Other civilizations would look upon the remains of the Zarkul system and understand. Earth would not burn in silence. The flames of Theta 9 had been answered with the fire of a star. The account was balanced. Justice, terrible and complete, had been served.